If you've just been diagnosed with osteoporosis, you're probably worried about it getting worse. You probably want some strategies to stop or slow the progression. You're probably also concerned about your fracture risk. Hi, I'm Meg, and today I'm going to share with you some of the key habits that I adopted that helped me reverse my osteoporosis under the three pillars of exercise, diet and lifestyle. What I've shared with you today also includes some steps so that you can get started today to improving your own bone health. Even if your ultimate goal is to improve bone density, simply slowing the loss of bone and muscle can significantly reduce your risk of fractures. It's important to stabilise your bones and build muscle after you go through menopause, and once you're able to do that, it's a significant win that's worth celebrating. The following habits done consistently over time will help you to stabilise your bone loss and may even help you to rebuild your bones like they did with me. As an extra bonus, doing these exercises will also help to build your muscles and protect your brain health, and who doesn't want that? So let's get started with the habits that you can start today to naturally improve your bone health. The first pillar is exercise. And the main habit under exercise is to do exercise every day. So you should be walking at least 30 minutes every day, and then you might want to alternate strength training, some impact training and some balance exercises. 2 of those each per week so that you're getting a really good workout, and you'll probably have one day where you just do your 30-minute walk. So that's what you'd call your rest day and recovery. While walking hasn't been shown to rebuild muscle, it certainly does provide some sort of stimulus to your bones because it is a weight-bearing exercise, and that can help reduce further loss and stabilise the current level of bone that you actually do have. The other benefit of walking, especially if you do a brisk 30-minute walk each day, is that it's really great for your cardiovascular system. So that helps get the blood flowing and is just great for your overall general fitness and health. It's also great for your balance, and as we know, improving your balance can reduce your risk of falls, thereby reducing your risk of fractures. A short walk after a meal is also a great idea, as it reduces your blood glucose levels and helps with your digestion. And the great thing about walking is that you don't need any special equipment. You just need to pop in a pair of shoes and maybe a hat, and off you go for your walk, and you're done. A 2025 meta-analysis found that resistance training can significantly improve your bone density, particularly in the areas of high fracture risk, which is your hips and your spine. Lifting heavy weights can help grow your bones and build your muscles, and it can reduce your risk of falls due to the additional strength and balance that you gain by doing these exercises. Now, any resistance program really comprises of 2 key elements. They are the strength training or resistance part of the exercise, as well as the second part is the progressive overload. Now, the resistance part can be a number of different levels depending where you are right now. You might think body weight is sufficient for you to start right now. That may be all that you need to actually push your body and give it the load that it needs. Alternately, you can use a resistance band, and once again you can just increase the resistance to make it harder. And then you have things like you've got free weights, so at the gym there'll be different weights that are all sort of programmed so that it's a little bit more controlled and possibly a little bit safer to get started with a little bit less supervision. And then you have the free weights, which can be dumbbells, or once you start getting heavier weights, you'll need to do a barbell because it needs to be able to hold those heavier weights, and you need to be able to manage them. But getting started, really, you probably want to look at just body weight only. When you get started with the strength training program, what you might find is it's great to actually adopt compound exercises. These are exercises that work multiple muscles at the same time, so it can be a little bit more efficient. It does require a bit more skill, so you may want to get some expert guidance to get started, but once you get your form right, these can be incredibly effective and time efficient. So things like the deep squat, once again, body weight to start with is just fine, and then as you progress, you can start doing weights ideally with a bit of supervision. One of the key things with squats is to remember to keep your knees lined over your toes, not folding in, which can often happen, and to keep your back relatively straight so you're not sort of hunched over. The other compound exercises are a deadlift, and there's probably a safer deadlift that you can do, which is where you might have just the bar or hand weights, and you start from waist level and lower them and then raise them back up, rather than picking the weight up all the way from the floor. Often people do injure themselves with that last part of the exercise. So if you want to reduce your risk, it's actually called a Romanian deadlift, and that's just where you're still doing a full deadlift, but you're not doing the squat part at the very end to put the weight down on the floor. The other compound exercise that's great is a shoulder lift, which basically involves either dumbbells or a barbell, and you just push the weight straight up. Don't lock your elbows tight, but have them fairly straight, and then you lower them back down to shoulder height, and that's one repetition. And ideally, you want whatever weight or body weight that you're using, you want to be able to get at least 5 repetitions in, and that's how you know whether it's probably hard enough for you. With body weight, you probably will want to do 10 to 15 repetitions, but certainly once you start adding weights, and certainly once you start progressively overloading, you'll probably, when you just go up on a weight or go up with resistance, you might only be able to complete 5 repetitions. That's okay, start there and then keep going. And then once you can do a few more repetitions, that's your indication that maybe it's time to increase the weight or the resistance again at that time, but only if you're able to still complete 5 full repetitions. And ideally you want to have what they call 2 to 3 reps in reserve, which basically means that once you finish the 5th repetition, for example, if that's the number that you wanted to go to, once you finish the 5th repetition, you could probably do another 2, maybe 3 repetitions after that. That's how you know that it's about the right level for you right now. Progressive overload simply means that the exercise just gets progressively harder. So that can be in the form of resistance within a resistance band, or it could be in the form of weights. The other way that you can actually progressively increase the load is to increase the number of repetitions. So for example, if you're only using body weight, you might go from 10 reps to 15 reps. Once you get to about 20 reps, you probably will want to add some weight, because it can get a little bit boring. I find once I get to sort of 10 or 15 reps, I prefer to increase the weight rather than increase the reps, because I get a little bit bored. You do what works for you and what you like doing, as long as you're actually progressively challenging your body and stimulating that bone growth. As I said, you can increase the resistance. So if you've got a resistance band, you can just use a tighter resistance band. You can increase the weight, you can increase the repetitions, or the other thing that you can actually do is you can introduce a bit of tempo training. So this is where you actually slow, for example, the lowering of the weight, or wherever the main strength part of the exercise is, that's what you would slow down. So for example, with a deadlift, you might start at your waist and then you go really slow to a count of 5 down past to your shins, and then you would come back up probably to a count of 2. So that's how you would do tempo. So it's just a matter of playing with what suits you, and depending what equipment you have as well. So if you've only got dumbbells, sometimes tempo can be a great way to increase that resistance without having to go out and buy more equipment or join a gym. Just remember, if it is advisable to work with a qualified trainer, at least when you get started, particularly if you have severe osteoporosis, because you do not want to get injured. And this is really for the long term. So the idea is get some assistance, get some training, make sure your form is 100% right and strong before you start adding weights, because you really can injure yourself quite badly if you do that. Doing some of the body weights are probably safe enough, unless you have, once again, severe osteoporosis. Check with your health provider whether they think that those exercises would be suitable for your level of osteoporosis. But if it's only mild, most of the body weight exercises would be fine. You'll probably be doing between 5 and 15 repetitions for each set, and then you want to do between 3 and 5 sets. So it just depends on which of the types of movement you've chosen to do and which level you've chosen to do. So if you're just doing body weight, you might be doing up to 15 repetitions, and you might just do that 3 times. Whereas if you're doing a really heavy deadlift, you might do just 5 repetitions and you might do 5 sets of that. The important thing when you're doing your heavy weight training is that you must have at least 24 hours rest in between, because that's when your bones and muscles actually do the building. So the exercise itself actually does break down muscle and causes tissue stress. So you need to give it time to actually rebuild. And particularly as you get older, sometimes even a little bit longer can be ideal. So maybe giving it 2 days in between. And this is why you might just want to do those heavy resistance training twice a week rather than always 3 times a week. And what you can do is you can just do it every 3rd day, so that one week you might get 3 sessions in and the next week you get 2 sessions in, because it is more beneficial if you can get 3 sessions in at least every 2nd week. Oh, and as an extra bonus, lifting a small number of very heavy weights actually has been shown to have significant cognitive benefits. So, you know, you're getting your bone health, you're getting your muscle health and your brain health all in one go when you do a weight training session. So that's incredibly efficient for your time and energy, and gives great health results. The other type of exercise you should be doing probably twice a week is impact exercises. So these actually give your bones a bit of a shock that tells them that it gives a bit of stimulus that tells them that they need to grow and become stronger. Now, if you have severe osteoporosis, you want to be very careful of these and make sure that you actually speak to your health professional to get some guidance. But even in the Lift More trial, that included a number of women with osteoporosis and some of it more advanced, they had impact exercise in that program. So it's not that impact is inherently dangerous, but you do need to be careful if you've got severe osteoporosis and are at higher risk. And start slowly. Don't start jumping boxes tomorrow. There are some really straightforward, simple ones you can do that are very low risk. So the 2 of those are stomps and heel raises. So stomps is basically you lift your leg so that your thigh is basically level with the ground, and then you just bang it down on your heel and give it impact. And the amount of impact you give it just depends on what your current ability is. So if you're more concerned that you're more fragile, don't do it quite so hard. If you feel quite robust, you might want to stomp a bit harder, and you can just walk around stomping, and that will give you good stimulus in your hips and your spine. The other one is heel drops, which pretty much anyone can do, and this is one I've given to a number of my friends that all do it as we do our teeth at night, and it just involves lifting up onto your toes and then dropping down onto your heels. Now you can start with doing it with shoes on if you want, and maybe not dropping quite so hard, but I find now that I've been doing it for some time and I have rebuilt some bone, I do it with bare feet, lift up on my toes and bang down quite hard on my heels so that I get plenty of shock through that spine and hip. And I'm quite convinced that that is one of the main factors that has helped with my bone building improvements. The biggest fracture risk for women over 50 is a fall. So doing exercises that improve your balance and your reaction time significantly reduce your risk of a fall. And they're really easy to get started. You don't need any special equipment, and you can do them with very little space. So the 3 exercises that I'd like to suggest as a great starting point, the first one is a single leg balance. Now, what I'd suggest is you stand next to a wall or a chair, just in case you lose your balance. You basically lift one, you're standing up, you lift one of your legs up so that your knee is parallel to the ground, and you hold that. Now, to start with, you'll probably find you're quite ordinary at this. You may not even get to a count of 10. But if you keep practicing it, you will get better, and you should try and hold it for a full 60 seconds on each leg. And that really gives you an idea that you've improved your balance. And once you get to that, you can actually then start looking around as you're doing the exercise, as you're doing the hold, just to sort of put your balance, really test your balance even further. And then once you can master that, you can actually try doing it with your eyes closed, so that you really have to focus on your balance. And once again, do this next to a chair or a wall, so that if you do lose your balance, you don't actually fall over and hurt yourself. Second one is a tightrope walk. It's exactly what you would think. You basically, once again, I'd suggest you do this next to a wall, so that particularly as you start, some people have very poor balance, and it can really help you to make sure you don't fall. And you're basically walking next to the wall, not touching the wall unless you absolutely have to, but you just go heel to toe forward, and then you do it in reverse as well as a really good exercise. And you just do that a few times. And once again, like with the raised leg, try doing it with looking around as you're walking forward and backwards, because that also really challenges your balance. I wouldn't suggest necessarily doing it with your eyes closed. That forward and backwards looking around is usually sufficient with that one. The other one, which is also a great little habit stack that you can add in the other time that you're cleaning your teeth, because you probably clean them morning and night, is the clock. And this exercise basically involves you standing, and with your leg out straight, you're basically pointing your toe in an arc around your body, and you do it both, then you switch legs and you do it with the other leg, and you go back, go forwards, back, round, and then back to the front. And you do that both legs. And if you just do it when you've got your electric toothbrush on, it goes for 2 minutes. You just keep doing that for the 2 minutes, and you've done your balance exercise for the day. The second pillar is diet. And the most critical of the second pillar habits is getting enough protein. Ideally, at least 100 grams to 120 grams of protein every day is a pretty good benchmark for most women. The guidelines recommend over 1.6 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight, or in the American calculations, they talk about 1 gram per pound of body weight, which is obviously more than that. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the range of where your protein should be. And for most women, that sort of 100 to 120 is a bit of a sweet spot, and requires a little bit less calculating to get there. And to be honest, protein is one of the most controversial topics in the market at the moment. So rather than get confused with everything, that seems to be a really good level that will be enough to rebuild your bones, but not so much that it actually does cause other potential problems, which are quite uncertain anyway. And the reason protein is important is that it's composed of 20 amino acids, and of those, 9 are essential and another 3 are conditionally essential. That basically means that for the 9 essential, you have to get that form of protein or that form of amino acids in your diet, and the conditionally essential, your body makes some but not enough, so you need to include additional support through your diet. And this is where your source of protein becomes really important. For most people, an animal-based protein is going to be far superior because it's a lot more bioavailable. That means it's much easier for you to digest and absorb those proteins or the amino acids within the protein. But that doesn't mean you can't have a plant-based diet, because you certainly can. You just need to be a little bit more careful and plan it out so you have the right matches of proteins, so that you're getting all of those essential and conditionally essential amino acids in the one meal, so that it is better absorbed. Protein is essential for your bones because it provides the scaffolding into which the minerals are deposited. So obviously you need that structure, otherwise there's nowhere for the minerals to actually go. So to build your strength, you need to make sure you've got plenty of protein that keeps that structure happening. Protein makes up 33% of your bone by mass and 50% by volume. So it's a really important macronutrient that is essential for you having strong bones. The first mineral I'll cover is calcium, which is critical for bone health, as it's one of the key building blocks that helps fill in that scaffolding that has just been created with the protein. and it helps with the strength, density and structure of your bones, so that it really is important. And interestingly, 99% of the body's calcium is actually stored in the bones. So if your diet is a little bit low in calcium, your body will actually take calcium from your bones to use it where else it's required, such as muscle contractions and for your heart health and those sorts of things. So it's really important to have enough calcium in your diet to make sure it supports both your bones and the rest of your bodily functions. Ideally, for calcium, you should be having 1,300 milligrams per day. And you can get this from a number of different sources. So leafy greens are great, as is dairy, and particularly oily fish with bones, such as tinned salmon with the bones, and sardines are an excellent source of calcium. One of the risk factors with calcium is with the absorption. So things like alcohol, smoking and coffee all inhibit the absorption of calcium. So it's really important to, for one, not smoke, and you know, don't drink to excess is always a good guideline. And in terms of coffee, by all means have your coffee, but try and wait at least 2 hours after eating before you have your coffee to make sure that that calcium has been absorbed. The other thing to be aware of for calcium is that oxalates can actually bind with the calcium to stop it being absorbed. So even if a food like spinach indicates that it has a high calcium content, because the calcium binds with the oxalates, your body's not able to access it and absorb it. So that's another thing to be aware of. Another essential mineral for bone health is magnesium. Magnesium actually helps with the absorption of calcium, and it helps to activate vitamin D, which is also critical for the absorption of calcium into the bones and laying down where it's supposed to go. Magnesium, you need at least 310 milligrams of that each day. And what you'll find is it can actually be really hard to get enough magnesium because the soil is so depleted in so many Western countries that the soil no longer contains the magnesium that it used to contain, which then means the plants and animals raised on that soil are then quite depleted in magnesium as well. So you may find that you do need to supplement with magnesium. So for example, I take a magnesium glycinate at night because I find that also helps me with my restless legs, and it helps with my sleep as well. So it does do an extra benefit there. And there are a number of magnesium types that you can take, but that's my preference and why. The foods that do contain magnesium, which I try to get these as well, include avocado, salmon, chia seeds, pumpkin seeds and spinach tend to be quite good sources of magnesium. The next mineral is potassium, which helps to reduce the loss of calcium. So it's obviously very important for your bone health for that reason. In addition, it can help to lower the acidity of certain foods that can cause extra inflammation. And as I've talked about before, inflammation is actually negative for your bone health as well. So anything that can keep your inflammation down is definitely a big help. The sources of potassium are things like avocado is actually quite good in it, as is banana, and some of the dark leafy greens like Swiss chard and spinach are also excellent, and also dried apricots, interestingly enough, are quite high in potassium as well. The next mineral is phosphate, which combines with calcium to give your bones the strength and rigidity they need to stay strong. And some of the examples of phosphates food, which I'll start with saying people are almost never deficient in it because it's in so many different foods. It's in a lot of dairy, meat, as well as legumes and nuts and seeds. So it's one of those things that's pretty easy to get for most people. Unless your doctor actually indicates that you're low in it, you probably don't need to focus on this, but it's good to understand the importance of it for bone health nevertheless. And finally, for the minerals, we have the trace minerals. So these are only required in very small amounts, but they are still nevertheless important because they help with the absorption of calcium and magnesium in the bones. So they basically support that structure of your bones. They help to make sure that the building up of your bones keeps up with the breaking down, which is vital for improving your bone density, because you want to make sure you're building more bone than you're breaking down. Your bones are a living organ, and that you replace about 10% every year. So you've got your osteoblasts, which are building up of the bone cells, and you've got your osteoclasts, which is the breaking down of the bone cells. And that's a natural process, and that happens all the time because bone gets damaged, or there's some cells that are a bit rogue. They need to get removed and replaced with new cells. So that's perfect. The problem is when the bone has been broken down faster than you're rebuilding it, and that's when it leads to osteoporosis. Some of those trace minerals include zinc is a big one, as is boron and silica, copper, psyllium and strontium are all important trace minerals. And you might find that you just have a trace mineral supplement that contains all of them. Otherwise, if you're just focused on the zinc and the boron in particular, so zinc is in oysters and shellfish, it's great in those. And boron, interestingly enough, just 5 prunes a day has actually been shown to improve bone density. So because of the boron that the prunes contain. So that's a really good one. That's an easy to implement in your diet. Okay, moving on to the vitamins. So the first and most important vitamin is vitamin D. It helps with the absorption and laydown of the protein, calcium and magnesium. So it's really critical that it is properly activated and working, and in sufficient quantities that it can support that bone health for you. There are a few different sources of vitamin D. The easiest one is not actually food at all. It is just being out in the sun. With a lot of us in offices, a lot of the days, vitamin D has become quite a deficiency. The other thing that impacts the absorption of vitamin D from your skin is sunscreen. So it's ideal to go outside for at least 20 minutes with your hands and ideally your arms and your face exposed, so you get a little bit of natural sunlight, not in the middle of the day, and it gets absorbed through your skin. And so maybe if you do like a 30-minute walk, brisk walk in the morning out in the sunshine, that's a great time. Don't wear your block out, just have your arms and hands and face exposed, and then you'll get a good amount of vitamin D that will probably do you for the day. The natural food sources of vitamin D are pasture-raised beef, dairy and oily fish are also quite good in it. But what you might find is that it is actually hard to reach the right levels just by diet alone. So you may want to consider a supplement. I actually use a spray that is a combination of vitamin D and vitamin K, which we'll get to next, because that's great. The vitamin K is really good because it actually stops the calcium going into the wrong area. So it stops the calcium going into your blood and sends it into your bones instead. Obviously, you don't want it to go into your blood vessels and calcify those. I just find a combination of the vitamin D and vitamin K is a great way to just boost my levels. With vitamin K, as well as it binding to the calcium to help make your bones stronger, it also helps to stimulate the bone cells and reduce the breakdown of bones. So remember we talked about that osteoclasts, you don't want those exceeding the bone building. So it actually helps to slow that down a little bit so that your bone growth can actually happen and you can improve your bone density. Some good sources of vitamin K are grass-fed butter, eggs, fermented vegetables such as kimchi and sauerkraut, and also cruciferous vegetables are quite a good source of vitamin K. The other important vitamin is vitamin C. It can help with the synthesis of protein so that it is stronger and more robust, and it also helps with the absorption of calcium to make your bones stronger and harder. And in addition, it can actually help with oxidative stress, which also can reduce inflammation, once again, which is beneficial to bone health. And so vitamin C is one of those nutrients that you can easily get from food. There's a whole raft. Most fruits contain vitamin C, so particularly citrus fruits. Things like bell peppers are great for vitamin C. So it is one of those things that's pretty easy to get enough of if you have regular fruit and vegetables. The other nutrient that is required under the nutrient pillar is omega-3 fatty acids. Now these tend to be found in oily fish in particular, and they can also be taken in supplements. Just be careful with a supplement because a lot of them are actually oxidised, and that renders them pretty much useless. Omega-3 is really, it's an anti-inflammatory fatty acid that helps with reducing inflammation. It actually also helps to improve the balance between the bone building cells, the osteoblasts, and the bone breakdown cells, the osteoclasts, making sure that is in much better balance. And it also helps with the absorption of calcium and magnesium, once again helping to make your bones stronger and more rigid. The third pillar for good bone health is lifestyle. So the first habit in that is making sure you get at least 8 hours of really good quality sleep, because sleep is when your bones do their rebuilding. So it is really important to get that sleep so that your body can do the work where your osteoblasts and your osteoclasts are breaking down and building up your bone during the night when you're in that deep sleep. So some of the factors you should think about with your sleep is making sure you've got a nice dark room to sleep in. Try and go to bed and get up at the same time each day. Getting morning sunlight in your eyes helps to reset your circadian rhythm. Don't drink too much water just before bed because you're more likely to have to get up and urinate. You shouldn't be having blue light in the 1 to 2 hours before you go to bed because that can actually affect your brain waves and cause you not to go into a full deep sleep. This alcohol affects your sleep, as does drinking coffee late at night. A lot of people don't think coffee affects them. They go to sleep no problems at all. But even if you do go to sleep quickly, it definitely does affect how deeply you sleep. And as I said, the deep sleep is when that real bone rebuilding happens. So it's really important that you get that quality deep sleep. And the final habit under the lifestyle pillar is stress. So while stress is perfectly fine and normal, chronic stress is not good, and it leads to inflammation and high cortisol levels consistently, which is very negative for bone health, and it's also bad for your ability to sleep. So, which again, as we've just talked about, is when your bones rebuild. So keeping that stress managed is really important. Other things that you can do to help manage your stress is exercise is great. So we've already talked about exercise. Things like walking can be really good, and strength training. In addition, you can actually do meditation each day, or just something simple like deep breathing exercises. So one that I love, and it's also excellent if you wake up during the night and have trouble falling back to sleep. This one works really well. It's a form of box breathing, but it's not even. It involves belly breathing, which is that deep diaphragmatic breathing where you breathe into your stomach, not just into your chest. So you take a deep breath to a count of 5, then you hold it for about a count of 7, and then you exhale quite slowly to a count of 8 to get all of the air out, and then hold for another count of 4 before breathing back in for that count of 5. I find I get to maybe 3 of those, and then the next thing I'm waking up the next morning. So that one's a really great way to help relax you and bring your cortisol levels down. If you've just been told you have osteoporosis, you're probably highly motivated to get started on these 3 pillars of diet, exercise and lifestyle. But remember, this is for the long haul. So just don't go too hard too early and burn yourself out or injure yourself. It will take time. For example, it took me 2 years of consistent effort to actually build back my bone, and it's only just come under the osteoporosis into osteopenia, but it's still a definite improvement, and my hips, which were osteopenia to start with, have improved on that scale as well. But the journey is not over. I still need to keep working on these 3 pillars to make sure I keep building my bone, or at least maintaining my bone so that I don't have further loss. And one of those really important parts that we talked about with muscle building is because you also, if you've been losing bone, you're probably also losing muscle, which means you're not as strong and capable, and you're more likely to fall. having that extra muscle strength for improved balance and the ability to catch yourself if you trip becomes even more important when your bones are a little bit weak. But because the bones and the muscles really work together, the stronger your bones the more they pull on your bones, which helps to strengthen your bones as well. So it's really important to do both of those things. And obviously the diet is so critical, because if you don't have your structural elements included in your diet each day, there's nothing for your body to work with to do that building. And if you've got too much inflammation, then that actually offsets the balance between the building and the breaking down of bone. So these are all things that you need to think about and just balance them in your day. But by adopting these habits and thinking about these things, it isn't actually that hard. And you can habit stack, as I've said. So for example, while you're doing your teeth, do your heel drops and your clock pointers so that you get your balance at different times when you're cleaning your teeth. And you can actually do some of the other balance training, so the tightrope walk. You can tack that on to the end of a weight training session, or you can just do it after a walk. It can be a great way. And the impact exercises, as I said, you've got the heel drops that you're doing then. You could do some stomps as well at the end of your walk so that you're getting that extra exercise in. And then, as I said, with the strength training, do that probably have 2 days rest in between, especially initially, and just keep rotating through that so that you're getting a good amount of strength training in. And focus on those 3 compound movements to get yourself started, which was the squats, the deadlifts and the shoulder press. And another one I'd probably add to that's really good is push-ups, because that also can really help with your core. And you can start those just against a wall. It doesn't have to be a full push-up on the ground. And even when you progress to the ground, you can actually start on your knees. It's whatever's challenging for you. It doesn't matter what's challenging for other people. It's what's challenging for you is what's going to build your bone. The other point I wanted to make is that consistency matters. This is for the rest of your life, so you are going to fall off the rails every now and again probably. You're going to want a nice dessert. You're going to want to skip your exercise one day. That's fine. Pick it straight up the next meal or the next day. So for example, when I go on holidays, if I'm away for a long weekend, for example, I'll try and do a weight session the day before or the morning of leaving, and then I'll do one as soon as I get back. So at least I sandwiched that break. So I might have 4 days off instead of the normal 2, but at least I'm getting a session before and after. Likewise, if I go off the rails and have some processed food because I'm out celebrating, the next meal I'm straight back onto that whole food balanced diet. A big part of this consistency is recognising that it's progress, not perfection, that you're after. You really are in this for the long haul. And another thing that you need to think about is, what is your why? For me, it's being strong and independent for as long as I possibly can be. But I also have a lot of other smaller reasons that help keep me motivated day to day. And you just need to have a think about what those are for you, and ideally write them down, because you will lose motivation every now and again. And it's good to refresh your memory and go, this is where I was, this is all the things that I want to be able to do. And by doing these habits and that formulate these 3 pillars, I'm doing the best thing I can for my bone health and to potentially rebuild my bones over time so that I stay strong and independent and are able to do all these things. So it might be so I can get down on the floor with my grandkids quite confidently, so that I can climb some steps, all those sorts of things that just everyday life that we take for granted are really important to have strong bones and a strong physical body and muscles to carry us through life so that we can enjoy life. So I always like a quick recap at the end of a video, because sometimes there's been so much covered I've forgotten what all of the pieces were. So as a quick recap, so pillar 1 was exercise. The habits that were under that were doing a brisk 30-minute walk each day, doing strength training at least 2 to 3 times per week, doing impact exercises at least twice per week, and doing balance training quite regularly, ideally at least twice per week. The second pillar was the diet. So that's making sure that you have enough protein, have at least 100 to 120 grams of protein each day, and ideally 40 grams in that very first meal that you have is what's recommended by a lot of the experts. And then making sure that you have enough of those minerals at the right time, and you're not drinking coffee straight after you've had your protein and your calcium, and also making sure you've got enough of those various vitamins. As said, the vitamin D you can also get from your morning walk if you have your skin exposed. And you may want to consider, like I take a supplement of a combined vitamin D, vitamin K spray that I do each morning after breakfast because it's fat soluble, so you want some fat in your system. And I have magnesium glycinate at night because it helps with my restless legs and it helps me relax and sleep. Omega-3 is obviously really important for oxidative stress and for inflammation. So making sure that you get enough of those oily fish each week then is also really important. And then the third pillar was lifestyle, making sure you get enough sleep each night. So you should be getting at least around 8 hours sleep, and ideally go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time. And that's 7 days a week, not just Monday to Friday. And that will help to set your clock, your circadian rhythm, so that you're really consistent with the waking and sleeping. And the final habit under that lifestyle is managing your stress. So we talked about some meditation and some deep breathing exercises that you can do, as well as the exercise will also help with that stress relief. Remember, while you may not be able to completely reverse your osteoporosis, you can definitely make some significant improvements to your bone density by following the habits that we've talked about today. So it's really is worth making that effort consistently over time to protect your bones and build your muscle. Hit like if you found this information useful, and please subscribe if you'd like to find out when my next video is live.